In Kenya, the relationship between the government and its people is often characterized by a distinct pattern. This pattern is not unique to Kenya alone, but is a common thread in many nations where the voice of the people is the driving force behind governmental action. It seems that only when the pressure of public outcry reaches a boiling point does the government stir into action. This phenomenon is a testament to the power of collective voices and the undeniable impact they can have on the political landscape. This reactive approach to governance, rather than a proactive one, raises critical questions about the true priorities of those in power. It suggests a governance model that is more concerned with maintaining the status quo than with addressing the root causes of societal issues. Are they truly serving the people or merely reacting to quell dissent when it becomes too loud to ignore? This question is at the heart of the ongoing struggle for a more responsive and accountable government. This pattern is deeply ingrained in Kenya's political landscape. The history of Kenya is replete with instances where public outcry has been the catalyst for significant change, from the fight for independence to the push for multi-party democracy. Time and again, we have witnessed the government dragging its feet on crucial issues until faced with the ire of the people. This delay in action often exacerbates the problems, leading to a cycle of frustration and unrest. Whether it's corruption scandals, economic hardships, or social injustices, the government often appears tone-deaf to the plight of ordinary Kenyans until their voices rise in unison, demanding change. This collective action is a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience of the Kenyan people. This begs the question, why should it take public outcry to spur the government into action? Why is there a persistent need for the people to raise their voices before their concerns are addressed? Shouldn't a responsible government be proactive in addressing the needs of its citizens? Proactive governance would not only prevent many issues from escalating, but also build a stronger, more trusting relationship between the government and the governed. The answer, it seems, lies in the complex interplay of power, accountability, and the often strained relationship between the rulers and the ruled. This dynamic is influenced by historical, social, and economic factors that shape the governance landscape. In a democracy, the power ultimately resides with the people. This fundamental principle is what drives the need for public outcry as a means of holding the government accountable. The government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. This consent is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process that requires continuous engagement and responsiveness from those in power. However, when the government fails to uphold its end of the bargain, when it becomes unresponsive to the needs and aspirations of the people, it risks eroding the very foundation of trust upon which its legitimacy rests. This erosion of trust can lead to increased public outcry, further straining the relationship between the government and its citizens. Ultimately, the cycle of public outcry and governmental reaction highlights the need for a more proactive and inclusive approach to governance. The recent appointment of 50 Chief Administrative Secretaries, or CAS, by President William Ruto's administration ignited a firestorm of controversy. This decision not only caught the attention of political analysts, but has also stirred a significant public debate across the nation. Critics argue that this move was not only fiscally irresponsible, but also a blatant violation of the Kenyan constitution. They did contend that the financial burden of maintaining such a large number of CAS was unsustainable, especially in a country grappling with economic challenges. The constitution clearly limits the number of cabinet secretaries to 22, a limit that was put in place to curb excessive government spending and promote efficiency. This provision was designed to ensure that the government remains lean and effective, avoiding the pitfalls of bureaucratic bloat. Despite facing legal challenges and widespread condemnation, the Ruto administration remained defiant, defending the appointments as necessary to enhance service delivery. They argued that the additional CAS would help streamline operations and improve the implementation of government policies. However, many Kenyans viewed this move as nothing more than a blatant attempt to reward political allies and consolidate power. The perception is that these appointments are a strategic maneuver to secure loyalty and strengthen the administration's political base. The sheer number of KS appointments, coupled with the exorbitant cost of their salaries and benefits, fueled public outrage and deepened the perception of a government more concerned with self-preservation than serving the people. Sadly, this never bothered the president. He implemented it no matter what. This issue goes beyond the legality of the appointments. It strikes at the heart of good governance and accountability. Good governance requires adherence to the rule of law, transparency, and a commitment to serving the public interest. By exceeding the constitutionally mandated limit on cabinet size, the government was sending a clear message that it is above the law and unaccountable to the people it purports to serve. This action undermined the principles of democracy and the rule of law. This blatant disregard for the rule of law set a dangerous precedent and further eroded public trust in the government. When the government appears to flout constitutional limits, it weakens the very foundation of democratic governance. The appointment of 50 KS was not an isolated incident. It was symptomatic of a larger pattern of governance that prioritizes political expediency over constitutional principles and fiscal prudence. This pattern raised alarms about the future direction of the country's leadership. It raised serious concerns about the government's commitment to transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. Public participation and vigilance are key to holding the government accountable and ensuring that it serves the best interests of the people. Ultimately, the future of Kenya's governance will depend on the collective efforts of its citizens to demand transparency, accountability, and adherence to the rule of law. Only through such efforts can the nation hope to build a government that truly serves its people. The government's proposed Affordable Housing Bill 2023 was met with mixed reactions, with many Kenyans expressing concerns about its potential impact on their livelihoods. The bill, which aimed to address the housing crisis in the country, sparked a heated debate among citizens, policymakers, and experts alike. The bill proposed a mandatory 3% deduction from all employees' salaries to fund the construction of affordable housing units. This deduction was intended to create a sustainable source of funding for the ambitious housing project. While the government argued that this initiative would address the country's housing deficit and create employment opportunities, it also claimed that the construction of these housing units would stimulate economic growth and provide a boost to the construction industry. However, critics viewed it as another burden on already struggling Kenyans. They argue that the bill failed to consider the financial strain it would place on individuals and families who are already facing economic hardships. Many Kenyans were already grappling with a high cost of living, stagnant wages, and a shrinking job market. The rising prices of essential goods and services have made it increasingly difficult for families to make ends meet. Adding another mandatory deduction to their already burdened paychecks was seen as insensitive and out of touch with the realities faced by ordinary citizens. The government's insistence on pushing through this bill, despite widespread opposition, raised questions about its priorities and its willingness to listen to the concerns of the people it governs. The protests and public outcry reflected a deep-seated mistrust in the government's ability to manage public funds effectively. But Ruto never cared. He forced it on the people. Furthermore, there were concerns about the transparency and accountability of the proposed housing fund. Critics argued that without proper oversight, there was a risk that the funds could be mismanaged or misappropriated. With a history of corruption scandals plaguing government projects, many Kenyans were skeptical about whether the funds collected will be used efficiently and effectively to achieve the intended goal of providing affordable housing. The lack of trust in the government's financial management has been a significant barrier to the bill's acceptance. The lack of clear guidelines and oversight mechanisms in the bill further fueled these concerns. Legal experts pointed out that the bill did not specify how the funds would be monitored or who would be responsible for ensuring their proper use. The government's handling of the Affordable Housing Bill highlighted a recurring theme in Kenyan politics: the tendency to prioritize grand projects and initiatives without adequately addressing the immediate needs and concerns of the people. This disconnect between government priorities and public needs has led to widespread disillusionment. Then there came anti-finance bill protests to which the president turned a blind eye until things got off hand. Lives were lost to police brutality. It was until then that the president decided to drop the bill. It will also be remembered that it took protests for the head of state to dissolve the cabinet. Does this mean that Kenyans are just used as voting machines, that their significance and opinions only count during elections, and thereafter they have no say on any matter of concern? A government that rules with a hard neck is a dangerous government not interested in serving the people, but to rule the people, and the youth should not buy its narratives.